Hi, and welcome back. I'm Hank Preston, a developer evangelist with Cisco DevNet, and today I'd like to talk to you about network control in the cloud, how you can develop with Cisco Meraki. This is a lesson inside of our Network Programmability Basics video course, and we're in the module on network controllers. We've already talked a bit about how you can use the network controllers for the campus with programming your own DNA with APIC-EM APIs, as well as in the data center with God SDN, understanding the ACI programmability options. And now we're moving up into the cloud and how we can use Cisco Meraki for cloud-managed networking. If you want to follow along with me, be sure to jump on up to GitHub where you can find Cisco DevNet/netprog_basics and download all the information for each of the exercises inside of all of these labs. Every lab includes a README that shows the details on how to set your own workstation up, as well as access to the DevNet infrastructure inside of the sandboxes to back up these lab exercises. In this lesson, we're going to start out with a quick discussion about cloud-managed network programmability and what Meraki has to offer. We'll then spend a good chunk of time on the dashboard APIs inside of Meraki for managing configuration and operational data and the health of your network. And then we'll end with a look at how we can actually use those APIs inside of our favorite REST API tool, you've guessed it, Postman, to explore all that we have to offer inside of Meraki. So cloud-managed network programmability. From Cisco, with Cisco Meraki, it all starts with the portfolio of infrastructure and resources that Meraki has to offer. We've got wireless LAN controllers, Ethernet switches, security appliances, even mobile device management, voice, and security solutions provided by the Cisco Meraki solutions, all managed through the cloud. Now inside of the cloud, we've obviously got the GUI interface, the web pages, the ability to manage all of that infrastructure with our portfolio and platforms. But this lesson is all about the APIs. And Meraki offers three basic APIs that we have access to. We have our dashboard APIs for configuration, operational information. We have scanning APIs so that you can track and get information about who's on your network or who's in the vicinity of your wireless network for context-sensitive information about the location inside of what's going on of your resources. And then finally, the captive portal API for building onboarding resources for folks to join your network, where you can inject marketing information or gather information about your users. Now, all of these API types are used by customers of Meraki with great success. Dashboard APIs are being used by service providers to automate the onboarding of customers across the globe. We've got scanning APIs being used by retail organizations so they can track the health of their marketing campaigns and look at dwell times across their locations. And the captive portal APIs, I know I love it when I go into a location and they offer guest Wi-Fi. I certainly don't mind signing up and getting information, getting added into their marketing pieces to get access to their Wi-Fi inside of their locations. And 25% of customers are opting into Wi-Fi marketing at captive quick serve restaurants, leveraging the captive portal APIs from Meraki. These are just some of the examples of the different use cases and solutions being built on top of the Meraki cloud platform. We've got analytics solutions using both Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth LE. We've got automation, marketing, mobile app solutions being triggered based on status and people coming into your location. Lots of great solutions across all of the programmability capabilities that Meraki has to offer. In this lesson, we are going to focus in on the dashboard API, which is the first API that is likely going to be valuable for you as a network engineer looking at automating your network with network programmability. Now, why might you want to get started? What's in it for you to use those dashboard APIs? Well, our service provider customers from Meraki leverage the dashboard APIs for managing and provisioning their customers and their customers' devices. We can assign templates to the different types of customers being onboarded. And they can even add administrative accounts for NOC and end user access in these managed environments. If you're not a service provider, if you're managing your own enterprise, well, there's lots of great use cases for you as well. Automate the deployment of large projects. If you've got hundreds or thousands of branches, use the dashboard API as if you're your own service provider. If you're on and offboarding teleworkers, the dashboard API gives you access to those. The possibilities are limitless with what you can do and accomplish with the APIs available from Meraki. To get started, though, you do need to enable access to that. Inside of your organization, you'll check the box to enable access to the dashboard APIs. And then once you've logged in from your profile, you can generate an API key. That key will be used for all the REST API requests that you will make. Now, what's available inside the dashboard API? We go to the documentation. Up online at dashboard.meraki.com/API_docs, you'll get all of the API documentation available. You can see all the dashboard objects available, including networks, clients, devices, SSIDs, phone numbers if you're using some of the Meraki voice solutions. Every API has the documentation available, showing you the methods that are available from get, post, put, delete, any parameters required, sample output, what do the responses look like when they send. And to get started quickly, you get the curl request that you can leverage for these API calls. Now, once you have the documentation and the API information you're interested in, you can use any CLI or API tool you prefer. For us, we're going to go to our favorite REST API tool, Postman. Now, as a reminder, Postman is this simple but very powerful REST API client where you can quickly test APIs using a powerful GUI. We can save those APIs into collections, leverage environments for managing multiple Meraki instances for these different API calls. We can even auto-generate code in Python, Go, JavaScript, PHP, so that we can start to build our own scripts and automation routines. Now, just like in other examples where we've used Postman, our first step is setting up our environment for using Meraki. In this case, what we want to provide is the actual Meraki API key that we got out of the dashboard as our first environment variable. That environment variable will be used to authenticate all of our API requests that go through. Now, as we talk a little bit more, we're going to see how each of the objects inside of Meraki has an identification, an ID field. Well, we need to have the ID fields for API requests. What we're using the environment variable here are for the friendly names for the things we might be interested in to make it easier to build our API calls. So in this example, we're setting up environment variables for an organization name and a network name. And in just a little bit, we'll see how we're using these environment variables to automatically create new ones to represent those ID fields. With our environment set up, we'll make our first call. In this call, we're going to get our organization ID. There's quite a bit going on here, so let's take a look deeper at it. All right, in this API request, what we see is that we're going to get our list of organizations. This is a great place to start when working with the Meraki APIs because we're going to need the organization ID for later API calls related to networks and devices that are out there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start out by setting up our header information. We can see here where we're creating a new header for the Cisco Meraki API key. Now, the name of that header is very specific. We need to provide that and then pass in the variable that we stored in the environment variable that holds that API key. Now, when we send this, we can review all the response details. And what we're most interested here is this organization ID. We're going to use this organization ID to make further requests for networks and devices. Now, as always, we've talked about this before, you can copy and paste from one API call to another, but why do that when we can use the programmability capabilities baked into Postman? So what we see here is we're, again, using that tests feature inside of Postman and just a little bit of JavaScript that, frankly, we can copy and paste from one example to another over and over again. And what we're doing here is we want to dynamically create a new environment variable for our organization ID. And we do that here by referencing the organization name environment variable that we set. So we're pulling down the organization name, in this case Meraki Live Sandbox, and then we're searching all of the return data from our organizations call for the organization ID, and then we're creating a new environment variable called organization ID. Now, if you don't understand all the code here, that's fine. The great news about this is you can leverage this by simply just replacing the organization name and the organization ID to replicate this across different types of use cases. And indeed, we can see that what we're creating is that new environment variable called organization ID. With our organization ID created, now we can use that to go ahead and get a list of our networks and subsequently the network ID so that we can then go even deeper and look at our devices that are in there. So if we look at here, we can see we're now making another GET request. We're starting again at /organizations. We're providing the organization ID using that environment variable that we created, and then we're looking at /networks to return all of the networks from the Meraki cloud that are available inside of our organization. Now that network ID that's returned, we're using that same trick, that same test capability inside of Postman to create a new environment variable called network ID. We can use that network ID inside of further requests for devices and other information we might be interested in. Now if you don't want us to get started with some of this JavaScript in the tests, you certainly can copy and paste from the output from one API call into another one as an alternative to actually doing the automation of the creation of these environment variables. All right, we saw this in slides. Let's go ahead and take a look at a live demo and see how this actually works using the API calls. All right, so for this demonstration, we're going to start at the API documentation, which again is available on the web at dashboard.meraki.com/API docs. Now inside of the API docs, we have the ability to look at all of the information for the different objects and types that are available using the API. So as we talked, we're going to start with our organization information. So if we look at organizations, we can see that we've got API calls to list all the organizations that a user has access to. We can create organizations, we can claim devices, kind of everything that you can do in the dashboard, you can do using the APIs. Each of these API calls, if we click on one of them, we can see the information about how to make this request. This is a GET request. We can see the API endpoint /organizations. We can show it provides us a sample request using curl on how to make this API request. And then what we can expect to get back from a response. If we look at the networks API, we can see that we do need the organization ID to list out the networks that are there. So we're going to go from organizations, provide the organization ID, and then networks will give us all of the information available. So we've seen the documentation. Let's actually see these APIs in action. So over here in Postman, I can see that I've got my environment prepped and set up and ready to go. So if we look at it, we can see that I've got my API key for Meraki stored in here. I've got the organization name, Meraki Live Sandbox that I'm interested in, as well as the network that I'm currently interested in. So if we make our request to get all of the organizations, because again, we need the organization ID to make the request about the networks, we can take a look here. Inside the header, I've created my Cisco Meraki API key and passing in that environment variable. If I send this request, I'll get all of the organizations back, and I can see the different ones that are listed. Now this account does have access to more than one organization. We can see Meraki Live Demo, we can see Sandbox 2. Each organization has that ID. Now, as we talked about, we're leveraging this test capability inside of Postman to actually query and create a new environment variable called organization ID based on the organization name environment variable that we created. And in fact, if I go and I look now at my environment variables, we can see that I do indeed have an organization ID that equals 549236, which is equivalent to the organization ID for Meraki Live Sandbox. All right, with that in place, now I can go ahead and query the networks that are available. So if I switch over to Get Networks, now I can see that my API call is organizations. There's my organization ID /networks. I send this away, and I will return back all of the networks that are available inside of this organization. And there's a long list of them available. Now, I was interested in a very specific one. Now, and we're using, again, tests to generate the new environment variable called network ID based on the network name that I had previously set up in my environment. If I go and I look at my current environment variables, we do indeed see that we now have a network ID. With this organization ID and network ID, I can make further requests. I can get the inventory, all of the devices that are available inside of my organization. If I send this away, I can see that I've got the model and MC74. If I scroll down farther, I can see I actually got several MC74s. I can see an outdoor access point listed here, and then MR26s. So we see our switches, our access points, all of the different devices in the inventory that we've got stored here. I can get network details, device details, clients that are available, all using the APIs from the dashboard. All right, that demo was great. We saw how we can use the dashboard APIs, combining the docs as well as inside of Postman. And so let's summarize and review what we've gone through in this lesson. We started out with a discussion of all the possibilities that you have by leveraging cloud programmability and the APIs available for Meraki, including the Dashboard API, the Scanning API, and the Captive Portal API. We learned how we can get started using the Dashboard API and then explored making different API calls using Postman. Now, if you didn't follow along, make sure you do that before you jump into the next video, but be sure to come back for those next videos and complete the entire Network Programmability Basics course. Also, join DevNet for more on Meraki as well as lots of other technologies, both network programmability as well as lots of topics. We have learning labs and development sandboxes that cover all of these areas. If you have questions in your journey, feel free to reach out directly and find me. You can find me on email or Cisco Spark at hapresto@cisco.com, and I'm active on Twitter at hfpreston, on GitHub at hpreston. And Cisco DevNet is active on Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, Instagram at Cisco DevNet. Once again, thanks so much for joining me for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.